The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as religion, sports, aviation, business, literature, and politics. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Bill Perkins, Deputy Majority Leader of the New York City Council, Councilman from the 9th Councilmanic District, a leader in politics in New York City. Glad to have you with us today.
Wonderful to be here. Perfect timing.
This is political season.
Yes, indeed.
The Republican convention is coming up. The Democratic convention is just over. There's an election coming up, Kerry versus Bush. What are the key issues that really should get the attention of the public in this presidential election?
Well, there's several, I think, that are very, very important for New Yorkers. Number one, affordable housing. We have a housing crisis in New York City, and that crisis needs some federal support. Anyone that really wants to represent this city in the national level as a president, Democrat or Republican, needs to speak to that. Number two, especially for communities of color, we have an extraordinary high unemployment rate. As you know, the Community Service Society recently had a report that pointed out that 51% of black men are unemployed, 47% of black women, 37% of Latinos. This is an intolerably high unemployment rate. The City Council has embraced this problem. We got $10 million in the budget to begin to address it, but it's a national issue. It's not something that is simply taking place in New York City. It's a national phenomenon, just like the affordable housing problem. And so this convention that's coming in the city now, as well as the Democratic convention, whoever wants to represent this nation needs to speak to those two issues. And then, of course, there are many other problems, problems with respect to health, our senior citizens and their prescription drugs and so forth, needs that the National Republican Party, National Democratic Party, the presidential candidates need to bring to the debate, and whoever wins needs to make sure they address it. Not to mention the problems that we're having with our electoral system. Just what we experienced in Florida in 2000. It has not gone away. We are still having problems with making sure that the right to vote is as sacred as all the other constitutional rights that we have.
It's interesting that as you approach these issues, you focused, and you should because of what you do, on the domestic issues. Yet, from what we hear in the polls, the thing that affects a lot of people is the foreign policy, the situation in Iraq. We're in a situation where we shouldn't be in, and we don't know how to get out. And the question is, which party is going to convince the public that their way is correct? New York State will probably go Democratic, but there are many states that are what they call battleground states, which could go either way. And these domestic issues, as important as they are, may or may not swing the vote because people are afraid because of terrorism. How do you see that factoring into the situation?
Well, first of all, I think that as a Democrat, the Democratic Party has to be against this war and has to bring home the troops as soon as possible. There is absolutely no justification for having gone to war to begin with. All the evidence is coming out now that clearly establishes that the weapons of mass destruction were really a mass deception on the part of the administration, that there is no relationship with Saddam Hussein and bin Laden, particularly in terms of the terrorist attack that took place, unfortunately, in our city. And I, of course, have unfortunately been one that has suffered family that lost in the attack. And so clearly, while right now the polls may be suggesting something regarding the war and dealing with the war, I think the best way to deal with that war is to get out of it and to bring those dollars and those troops back home so that we can deal with the domestic agenda. As you may recall, we were having a war on poverty in the 60s. And that war on poverty was a war that was sacrificed for the Vietnam War. And that was a similar situation that we're in now. So domestic agenda was a victim of poor foreign policy. We're seeing billions and billions of dollars going over to Iraq now. that, and Halliburton in particular, and other such companies that are making millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars, those dollars belong in our public school system so that our children can have smaller class sizes. Those dollars belong in our cities so that we can provide affordable housing. Those dollars need to be brought back to our cities so that we can begin to really rigorously fire up this economy so that real serious living wage jobs can be created, not the kind of jobs that are being created right now that are low-paying jobs, but jobs that are really the kind of jobs that a man and a woman, a family can have and raise themselves up with. So that, while you can't separate the domestic agenda from the foreign agenda, because the foreign policy cripples the domestic policy. So we've got to get out of the Iraq situation and turn those dollars back into our economy.
But why do you think the country is so clearly divided? It's 45-45, one candidate or the other. The Republican convention is going to be going on, and they're going to be talking about what they're doing to keep America safe and how anybody who doesn't vote for defense is disloyal and the like. Why is the electorate so divided?
Well, I think that the Republicans, to their credit, have done a great job of fooling the people in terms of believing that this is about values and it's about the war. And as a result, there are many in those so-called red states that will be voting against their own best
red,
interest.
that means the Republican states and the blue states in the map
right.
of the
And
Democrats.
so they'll be voting, unfortunately, against their own best interests.
Well, how do they know that? How do you help them to understand that it's against their own best interests?
Well, we have to make the case as to what is truly going on. And sometimes our party has not stepped forward as forthrightly and aggressively as it should to make the case. Sometimes we have leaned over backwards to appear like the Republican Party, as if that's going to make the public respect us and vote for us more.
But as a citizen, do you really want a party that's weak on defense, that is not defending us against terrorism?
I think defense begins at home. A strong economy is a strong defense. And I think, number one. I think, number two, we are the number one power in the world. No one is challenging us.
But we're showing it. We're democratizing Iraq.
Well, one could call it democratizing if one wants to buy into the lie that is being perpetrated by the administration.
Well,
the people of Iraq are not applauding it as
well,
such.
Some aren't. How can we get that message across? That really is the concern, because the Republicans deliver a very strong message. The Democrats have not developed a strong enough message as why the economy is more important than terrorism.
You have to convince the leaders of the party that the position that they should be taking should be anti-war in terms of foreign policy, should be bringing the troops and the billions of dollars home so that we can fortify our own economy and our own domestic agenda, that we should re-establish relationships with our friends and allies in other parts of the world, and that we should not assume that we can go it alone, that it was a mistake for us to ignore the United Nations in terms of their involvement in Iraq. And it was a mistake for us to go in there under the pretext that we went in there. Now, all we can do is make that case. Clearly, the Republicans have the upper hand in certain parts of the country from that point of view. But I think if we buckle in to that point of view, just for the sake of getting elected, the public has shown in the past that why have an imitation Republican when we can have a real Republican, and therefore why vote for a Democrat that acts like a Republican? We have to be Democrats with a progressive agenda that speaks to the needs of urban America, that speaks to the needs of our city, that speaks to the needs of housing, that speaks to the needs of unemployment, that speaks to the needs of education, that speaks to the needs of our senior citizens, as well as develop a foreign policy that creates friends and not enemies. What we have done is created enemies, not friends.
That certainly is true, but the Republicans say if we took out those troops and all that money from Iraq, the whole Middle East would fall apart. Israel would fall. The Arab world would be energized against us, and that would be against our interests because then we wouldn't have oil. So how do you answer those? Those are somewhat sophisticated questions, but how do you answer those in a soundbite that voters can understand?
Well, let me say this. It seems to me that there's a lot of anti-Americanism already. Mm-hmm. All we can do is better. We can't get any worse. Mm-hmm. So it would seem to me that we have a responsibility to support Israel and to support peace in the Middle East. And I think that we are better in that approach with a different agenda, with an agenda that has allies that are, at this point, acting as if they are estranged from us at best. And so it's important, I think, that we recognize that we've made a mistake. That's the first step towards reconciliation. That's the most important thing. We've made a mistake. Everyone faces the fact that we've made a mistake. Hundreds and hundreds of young people are dying over there. We're not even who are Americans, not to mention innocent children and other victims in Iraq. And the bottom line is that it seems as if it's a deal to help some of the friends, the wealthy friends of the Bush administration, like Halliburton and so forth. So it's not a foreign policy that is designed to fortify America or to fortify our relationships with the world. It seems quite the opposite. It seems to be a very petty, small type of agenda for a clique that surrounds the president and is making enemies for us instead of friends.
But the public would say 9/11, those 3,000 people, wasn't just something for a clique. That's a real challenge to our country. And the question is, if we don't have strong leadership, military power, maybe the country will be at risk. How do you answer that question?
We have strong leadership. We have strong military power. We have the superpower, so there's no question about.
But shouldn't we use it? That's the question. We use it in Iraq.
The question is, how do we use it? Mm-hmm. And it's not whether or not we should use it. It's how do we use it? And in some instances, we shouldn't be using it, particularly when it came to the situation in Iraq. I don't think we should have done that. In fact, as you know, I passed a resolution in the City Council opposed to the war in Iraq, as well as opposed to the Patriot Act in terms of how it violated civil rights and civil liberties. So we should be using diplomacy. We should be using peaceful methods. You know, we should have a department of peace, not a war department. We should have a vision that represents a totally different, diametrically opposed approach to foreign policy than what we're doing now. We are in a way imperialistic. We are in a way imposing our agenda on other countries and threatening those that would suggest anything different, a kind of punishment that I think is undemocratic and is unpatriotic and is not the American way.
But see, you speak as a Democrat and you speak issues that basically most Democrats agree with. But the Republicans say these are exactly the kind of issues that are going to cause our country to be at risk from terrorism. They're exactly the kind of issues that are going to cause a deterioration of values in our strong society. And that's the message the Republicans are going to be sending. How do you refute that?
Well, they're absolutely wrong, for one. You know, we need to fight terrorism. And we need to fight terrorism in a way that is effective. We have not been effective in the way that the Republicans have been fighting terrorism, clearly. Terrorism continues, and it seems, if you listen to Dick Cheney and the like, we're at greater risk than ever before. So what they're doing is not lowering the risk, it seems to be raising the risk, number one. Number two, in terms of values, I think that we all share basic the same basic values in terms of family, in terms of community, in terms of our patriotism to the country. And I think that's very, very important. Now, they want to use defensive tactics when it comes to certain types of lifestyles that I don't think necessarily the value that we want to impose on people. I don't think there's one sort of type of family, if you will, or type of lifestyle that is the American way. And to suggest otherwise, I think it creates a very un-American and undemocratic approach to this great experiment that we know as the United States. You know, if they had their way, we would be considered second-class citizens, even to this day. And as you know, they have had problems with affirmative action and other great landmark accomplishments of the civil rights movement. And so I don't think that those are the values that have made this country the great country that it is.
Well, the Republicans are reaching out to African Americans. They say we are going to be an inclusive party, and some African Americans who are Democrats or independents say, yes, we ought to try the Republicans because the Democrats have taken us for granted. And Republicans say, we are not going to take you for granted. We've got Condoleezza Rice, we've got Colin Powell, we've got Michael Powell. We are part of America. How do you respond to that?
Well, three doesn't make an us. It's just, three is three. One,
what about the outrage?
But you know, there's a great deal of outrage that's being expressed, by the way, as you know, by local black Republicans because they feel they're not only being taken advantage of, but they feel they're being slighted. Great Republican leaders like Adrian Holder on the local level, leaders like, what's his name, from Roy Innes from CORE and his son have been screaming at the Republican Party because here they have been carrying the Republican flag in the Democratic bailiwick, and the day comes when the Republicans have a party in New York and they're not even invited to be a part of the party. So what kind of love is that? Show me some love, they're claiming. Show us some love. And so if they're not taking care of their own, how are they planning on taking care of the rest of us?
But you said they've been carrying the Republican flag. What have they been saying that really is Republican?
Well, whatever the Republican Party wants them to say. They say vote Bush, they say vote Bloomberg, they say vote Giuliani, they say vote Pataki. Pataki says we're not for a campaign for fiscal equity for our children. He challenges us on that. Giuliani challenges us on police brutality and racial profiling. Bloomberg challenges us on our civil rights and civil liberties when it comes to demonstrating in Central Park. He believes that grass trumps the rights of the grass, trump the rights of the citizens when it comes to protest. So this is what they're championing. And as far as we're concerned, as blacks, as people who live in this city, no matter what our party is, that's not the message. Those are not the answers for our community.
But you yourself said that the Democratic Party hasn't done enough to carry that message and support some of our issues. If we can't join the Republican Party and the Democrats aren't working, should we think about a third party?
We should always leave our options open, and we've always done that as a people. We've always moved in a direction where our interests can best be fulfilled. In fact, when the Republicans were taking care of us, thanks to Abe Lincoln, we were Republican. And then when they stopped taking care of us, we decided to become Democrats. So we're flexible. We're very flexible. We're practical like everyone else. At this point in time, however, the fact of the matter is that the greatest opportunity for us to extract what we are entitled to and what we deserve is through the Democratic Party. That's the reality. And the Republican Party, instead of moving closer to us in terms of our needs, on whether it be education, whether it be employment, whether it be housing, whatever area you look, they cut taxes for the rich and the rest of us get crumbs. The Republican Party is moving more and more conservative, more and more in a direction that is anti the kind of values and the kind of lifestyle that we as a community embrace.
But they're dragging the Democratic Party to the right, and some folks like yourself think the Democratic Party should be moving to the left.
And we're fighting our colleagues within the party tooth and nail to make that happen. And if the time comes where a break has to be made, I'm sure the break will have to be made, because the reality is we are not orthodox Democrats per se. We are members of the Democratic Party because we have an agenda. It's not the party, it's the agenda that's important. And so whoever can fulfill this agenda that we have as a people, as a community, that's where we're going. Right now, the Democrats have anteed up much more than the Republicans, and that's why we're there right now.
So if the Republicans came up with a program to do more affirmative action, get more money into black businesses, which they're talking about, some folks like yourself would be inclined to support the Republican agenda.
Well, it's not simply about a program. It's also about policy. You see, they'll give you a program. Anybody get a program is here today and going tomorrow. What we want is power and policy, because that determines not only on a short term but a long term where the city, the state, and the nation will be headed in terms of our interests. So sure, they'll create a program and tell some faith-based organizations, come and get a part of this program. But that in and of itself does not truly represent the kind of policy and the kind of power or the kind of opportunity to affect decisions that are truly needed. They also have to understand that there are values behind this. The values that they are championing right now are values that I don't think that our community fully embraces.
What kind of values do you think they're championing that our community wouldn't accept? Our community accepts God and family and so on.
I think one of the most important values that has been verified in by the Supreme Court is pro-choice, for instance. And you know, we are a community that appreciates the fact that a woman should have the opportunity to make decisions about her body. Our history as a people has been to free our bodies, you know, particularly from slavery, but throughout the history in this country, we've been trying to free ourselves to make decisions for ourselves about how our bodies, our labor, and in the case of our women, pro-choice, the choices they want to make about childbirth. So that's a very, very important and critical issue that I think separates us from them, that I think is why we will have a difficult time stepping over to that side.
One of the key issues will be the next president will probably appoint 2 Supreme Court justices. And the Supreme Court has been 5-4 on issues like abortion rights and affirmative action. So maybe that might be a good reason to say, let's get a president in there who will support those particular issues and appoint Supreme Court justices who will not turn back the clock.
That's what I'm talking about. And as you know, the Republicans, when they have come to us to find one of us, they gave us Tom, Supreme Court Judge Thomas.
They also gave us Colin Powell.
As I said, you see what they've given us. And
well, Colin Powell
has been made a chump in the Republican Party, especially around Iraq. So here was a man of great stature who was presidential timber, as they say. And what has happened? He has lost face. The Bush gang mugged him on Iraq, had him sitting before the world at the United Nations. Telling lies that they fed him to read. And then he was embarrassed to find out that there were no weapons of mass destruction. So that is not the kind of example that they are providing of how they will represent us if we were a part of their team. It seems to me that they are failing with the leadership that they presently have.
Well, in terms of voter registration, are we doing a good job in getting voters registered? The next thing is to get them counted. Are we doing a good job in getting them registered?
There's a lot more to go. I mean, if you're talking about the legacy of our people, we are not living up to the sacrifices that were made to knock down those doors of opportunity to register and vote. We're not registering to vote.
What about counting the votes?
And we're not registering to vote. We're not voting at the level we want. And the technology at the polls continues to be on the horizon because this Bush administration again has come up with a response to the debacle in 2000 in Florida that now is making it even more difficult for people to register and vote, because now they have to register and vote with ID, and as if they were trying to catch people who are being fraudulent, and in fact what they're basically doing is making it more difficult for people to register and vote.
I want to thank Councilman Bill Perkins for being with us on today's African American Legends, talking about the upcoming presidential election.